balance is all important. And to an extent, we were disappointed. We thought that Dravid might bring a certain difference in
Giri, I think you've muted yourself.
that.
But it's very poetic. You muted yourself when you were talking about Dravid.
TV umpire to director, we have a player review. Can we rock and roll, please?
Friends beyond the corporate grey and cricket greens, and colleagues at Azim Premji University, Giri and Raghu and Giri, represent the best of the cricket romantic tradition. Their romance transcends generations and cricketers and formats and is ultimately about bat and ball. It comes from lived experience at different levels for both of them, and it also comes from watching a lot of cricket and reading so much about it. Since they decided that they have a unique point of view to present about cricket, their creative output has been tremendous. They've written a book on India's greatest tests called From Mumbai to Durban. They also have a podcast now, which they'll talk about. But the toast of the town right now, and I dare say their first love, is this absolutely delightful book called Mid Wicket Tales, which is a cricket book for the fan, by the fan, and of the fan. They've recently come out with a new edition of this book, and we'll spin yarns aplenty about it today. Friends, welcome to a special episode of Bits and Pieces, where we have these two esteemed gentlemen with us, who are also great fans of the game and in their own right, amazing cricketers too back in the day. We also have with us Tony, Varun Murli, and Prashant, regulars on the pod, to talk to them and get to know all about the book. So, Giri and Raghu, since I am the host, I get first rights at asking you something, and I'm going to make full use of it. I'm going to ask you a three-parter. Even if I don't get my turn later, it's fine. The first one is that it's the age of T20s, right? And matchups is a huge thing. Giri, you are a leg spinner, and Raghu sir is a left-handed batter, which is not a great matchup in both directions. How did you two sort of come about and create this amazing duo? The second one is that for Mid Wicket Tales, you've chosen the newest edition. You've chosen Speaking Tiger as the publisher. Does that mean you consider Tiger Pataudi to be a better captain than Wadekar? And the last one is, of course, tell us all about the book and the new edition in particular.
Supplementary question to two is if this is on Speaking Tiger, are you the real paper tigers or is it the Indian team that can't win any silverware?
Second question about Tiger and Pataudi and Badekar. And one, Pataudi was a hero because he started looking at team spirit and moved away from the dominance of the West Zone, contributing 9 out of 11 cricketers till then. And he's the guy who brought in people from the South and from Bangalore, Chennai, and Delhi and Bengal. But to us, after Pataudi, it wasn't Wadekar, but the greatest captain, test captain to both feet, is very clearly Saurabh Ganguly. Two, Giri was the leg spinner. I was the left-hand bat. But more than a left-hand bat, I was a very, very accurate off-spin. I have two bowling analyses which are quite amazing. One was 7 for 11 and the other was 7 for 4. Wow. And both these were in time shield in Bombay. But I must confess, the opposing side didn't know how to bat. But still, 7 for 4 is something, isn't it?
First question was on T20 matchups, etc. I sometimes get confused, but if you will allow me recency effect, then I must remind you that Ashwin clean bowled Labuschagne in a one-day just some months ago. And that was a right-arm off-spinner bowling to a right-hand batsman, but producing something very different. See, everything is good in moderation and everything is good in perspective and context. If you go mechanically and say leg spinners should not bowl to left-handers, then I should never have bowled to Raghu. It's a different matter. He clobbered me. That's different. By the way, I've taken a few left-handers bowled middle stump, bowling from over the wicket and turning it in. So matchups are good, matchups are important, but you should not take it to the extreme. I think always middle ground is wisdom.
That the right answer to the first question about matchups, Raghu is a fantastic close-in fielder. And which off-spinner wouldn't want to have, an amazing close-in fielder to go with him?
I enjoyed fielding, so did Giri. I was a short leg fielder, and Giri in our few matches was a gully field. But coming back to matchups, few important games that India played was what Ashwin would have done to Travis Head. If only he had been given a chance, not only in the final earlier when Australia beat us in the Test Championship, but again here in the final of the 50 over. In both these games, Travis Head was the villain as far as India was concerned. And unfortunately, we didn't have the proper matchup.
I was about to say, with your 7 for 4 and 7 for 11 and your podcasts and books, you're obviously the preeminent off spinner who was also a podcaster above Ashwin. He's just following in your footsteps.
that is the Parapratlavusi genre of bit.
Yeah.
Well done.
Correct. No, but allied question that I had was obviously we are aging, but not necessarily in that retirement zone yet, and we haven't seen as much cricket as you have. But how did you take the defeat on Sunday after especially 10 wins? Are we just spoiled because the team has been playing so well, or are you equally devastated despite the number of probably debacles that you've seen over the years?
Cricket to me has always been a game. Whenever any side played well, I enjoyed it. So I'm not one of those who like to see India winning all the time. Therefore, devastated is not at all anywhere near what I felt. Disappointed, sure, because after those first 10 games, it was fairly evident that we were the best team overall in this championship. But on that day, perhaps we got a few things wrong, and Australia, I think, played much better than they had done throughout the earlier period. They got many things right.
Raghu answered it very objectively, but let me tell you that Raghu also gets very tense while watching us play and sometimes has to move away from the TV. When we watched the India-Australia World Cup match at Chennai, of course, we couldn't move anyway, but 5 for 3 did trouble us at that point of time. So to be honest, I would say definitely sad, definitely disappointing, hurting in fact that we lost the final, and that hurt still lingers, I must tell you. But the other part of what Raghu said is important. Travis Head plays a beautiful straight lofted drive or a superb cover drive. If you're cricket lovers, involuntarily, even in front of the TV set, you will say, what a shot. So if you are watching cricket without being able to say what a shot when Travis Head plays a beautiful shot and waiting for him to get out, then I don't think you're a cricket-loving spectator. You are an Indian cricket win-loving spectator. Because I've also seen other extreme comments from some people saying, oh, I'm so happy, they deserved. All nonsense. All of us are bitterly disappointed that we lost, particularly because we had played so well all through. And yet, I think we should also develop the ability to appreciate the opposition when they play good cricket. On that particular day, Australia certainly played better than us. Tactically were better than us. It's a pity because I think we played the perfect 10, literally and figuratively, in the previous games.
10 minutes in, and Ashwin and knowledgeable Chennai crowd have already made an appearance on this podcast. So we are good. We are ticking off the bingos.
Nobody used to be that. In fact, one of our proudest moments as a Chennai cricket fan was when we allowed that Pakistan team to take a winning lap when they won that very close match after Tendulkar had hit a century. I felt immensely proud that day that we could let Pakistan take a winning lap, and the whole crowd stood up and cheered them, and they did that. That was simply brilliant. On the other hand, Raghu, I agree. I wonder if the Australians had taken a winning lap in Ahmedabad, whatever was left of the spectators, I know many had left by then, would they have also done at least a little bit of cheering to compensate for the silence during the rest of the match? They would have. I think they would have. They would have. We are not that crass that they would have put them on something like that. Yeah.
Since we're on the subject of Chepauk 99 and the World Cup final, would love it if both of you could tell us about your first cricket heartbreak. Which was the first cricket match that broke your heart? For us, it's hard to think beyond Chepauk 99, honestly, for our generation. That when I started watching cricket in 54, 55, this match I watched was when Mankad and Roy put on 413 for the first wicket against New Zealand. That was the first test I watched. But the real heartbreak, I think 67,
against West Indies. Cricket came back to Chepauk after more than a decade in Corporation Stadium, quite sad compared to Chepauk. 67 was one of the finest matches that happened in Chepauk. It was a team led by Sobers, and their attack was Hall, Griffith, Sobers, and Gibbs. And in the previous week, in a match against South Zone, their fast bowler had simply bundled us out, and the whole nation was crying about how we still not play fast bowling. So here we were in Chepauk, and we started the test match with Farooq Engineer opening with Dilip Sardesai. And Farooq Engineer was 94 not out at lunch. And he had just faced 4 bowlers, Hall, Griffith, Sobers, and Gibbs. You can't have an attack which is better than that in 1967. And he played like an absolute champion. He was hitting in the V and square cutting and pulling as well. And it was totally amazing. And the big heartbreak was we played brilliant cricket throughout that match. Vishen Bedi bowled very well. Sanna was at his best. And finally, in the last day, Griffith joined Sobers. They were 7 down with just Hall and Gibbs to follow. And Sobers asked Griffith to just shove his pad out and take everything on the front leg, knowing the umpires would never give a batsman out LBW if he were full stretch forward. Those were the days. And they managed to draw the match with that kind of tactics. And that was my first real heartbreak at Chepauk.
I was 12 years old when I was following the India-Australia 1967-68 series very closely. We had lost the first 2 tests with no competition. But the third test at Brisbane, we really had a good chance. That was the Jaisima 101 innings. We were agonizingly close to winning that and fell short by just a few runs. Borde, with whom we spoke some years ago, did mention very strangely that they had a chance, but a couple of decisions were marginal. He said it very politely, but for us, just listening to radio commentary and Alan McGilvray and Chakrapani, for me as a 12-year-old, it was heartbreaking to see India come so close to a win and lose. But that was as a 12-year-old. But many years later, in 1979, Venkataraman's team almost won the test match at Oval with Gavaskar's 221 and that huge partnership with Chetan Chauhan. And I think we needed 6 runs an over and 70 runs or something like that mandatory times when Venkat sent Kapil Dev 2 down ahead of Vishwanath. And that move failed, unfortunately. And then afterwards, instead of sending Vishwanath, I think he sent Yashpal. And finally, Vishwanath came 5 down. And Vishwanath was caught first bounce because Vishwanath walks. And Vishwanath was convinced that that catch that was taken at cover or short cover probably bounced in front of the fielder. All ifs and buts, but I think India fell by just a mere 8 or 9 runs, chasing some 429 or something like that. That was heartbreak. When we wrote Mid Wicket Tales, we spoke to Venkat. We went to his home and spent almost 4 hours chatting with him about everything. And I couldn't resist. Dukti rakh pe haath rakh diya maine by asking Venkat, boss, what was that decision? And Venkat, by the way, whatever you may say, among all our cricketers of that time, was the strongest minded individual. Sometimes if you don't know the person well, you might think, oh, is that cockiness or arrogance? It was just sheer self-belief. So this happened in 1979. So in 2017, January, Venkat tells us, I still stand by that decision to send Kapil 2 down. It is just a question of a bit of bad luck. Sometimes it fires, sometimes. If you ask me again, I will send him again. So that was his immense self-belief while taking a decision like that. All of us outside saying, "Arey, kyon kar diya aise?" So it's a very funny thing, but that I think was heartbreaking for us because it would have been an all-time record. We just won Port of Spain scoring 406. And then 2 years, 3 years later, you had another magnificent chase. So we've had some great times, but heartbreak is invariably around something terrific that you could achieve and just missed by a bit. For younger generation, if I may add a third thing, I think even Kohli's 2014 chase at Adelaide was heartbreaking. But we can go on like that because what is sport if not a mix of elating wins and heartbreaking loss? That's what sport is all about. Which is why I think today, if you say, can you discuss the final, we can discuss it. Because we know another final will come.
No, so I was actually more going at it from the point of before you turned stoic and all of that. How did you deal with heartbreaks? Because we have a very boisterous WhatsApp group, right? That keeps going, I think, around 10,000 messages a day. I mean, there are obviously like 40 people and whatnot.
Yeah.
In the last 1 week, it's been like sepulchral silence is the word. I think. That's been what's been happening. So did you have phases like that? Was the first
No.
heartbreak much worse than the recent one?
This was one of the worst. This was one of the worst. If I can lead on Raghu on this, this was one of the worst. Because before the tournament started, I and Raghu and many of our friends said, if we come to the semi-final, that's a job well done. And most of the time he was saying to win, if you win 6 games, you are in the semi-final. So you're allowed one upset and you're allowed to lose 1 or 2 matches to some good teams like you. So if you'd done 7 out of 9 and come to the semi-final, I think that would have been a great performance. If you've done 6 out of 9, you will come in. And with 7 out of 9, if you make it to semis, you're fine. But here we had played flawless cricket, Tony. We had played absolutely flawless, brilliant cricket. 10 on the trot. Therefore, to lose the 11th game when it counted was very heartbreaking. Just imagine, before the finals, Raghu and I have been telling people that our 1985 Benson and Hedges team has been our best ODI team ever. I know results are not everything. We should still be able to stoically accept it. But had we won the World Cup 2023, we would certainly say Rohit Sharma's team, best ever team, and then Gavaskar's 1985 team. Now, perhaps there'll be split votes and no unanimity. Some people will still insist that the 85 team was better. But that's how cruel the game is. But Raghu will argue with me. Over to you, Raghu.
I am afraid I will argue very seriously on this, because though we won 10 games at a stretch, from game 2 or game 1 itself, I was very, very pissed with our selection of the 11. For the first few games, to me, the shocker was Shardul Thakur making the 11. I have never considered him a good enough cricketer to play for India at all. And what was particularly painful is that Shardul Thakur made the team very often over the last so many matches, because our selectors considered him a better bet coming in at number 7 as a batsman. Now, please tell me what makes people think Shardul Thakur is a better batsman than Ashwin. What has Shardul Thakur done that makes everybody think he's a batsman? He's neither batsman nor a bowler, according to me. I am talking about selection. So that was a bad selection. And the other terrible thing that happened was picking somebody ahead of Shami. To drop Shami for the first 4 matches was also a very, very bad blunder. And the only thing one way that decision could be justified is when I was with the Karnataka skipper Jaswant a few days ago in another panel. Jaswant said possibly Dravid felt that Shami lost the whole 11 matches, 10 or 11 matches, and wanted to preserve him, and therefore didn't play him in the first few matches. So I would not say this was a great 11. Yes, as a team it was great, but our selection still left me very, very angry all through.
So just picking on a couple of points, I think I love the fact about what you mentioned about Venkat, like from Tamil Nadu, like strong-minded off spinner. He's really unique, isn't he? Just moving from heartbreaks, because it's a period of our cricket, the 60s and the 70s, where we really took major strides as a cricketing nation as well. Like there's plenty of memorable victories, especially away from home. Like growing up, I was jealous of that generation because I lived through all the 90s and the 2000s, where like we were longing for like one test win. I mean, forget a test series. We were longing for like one test win away from home. If you could just throw some light through the 60s, 70s, like what is the mechanism for following cricket, and like how did the nation like react? Because again, it was a nation coming from independence, like wars happening, etc. So I would presume that it must have like brought a lot of joy, but unfortunately we always talk about '83 as the coming out moment of Indian cricket. So, I mean, what was it in those days, especially the late 60s, early 70s, basically?
You see, in the 60s, we would go abroad once in 2 or 3 years. So after the West Indies tour, where Nari Contractor was hurt in 61, 62, we went abroad, I think, in 67, when we went to England, if I'm not mistaken. And afterwards, in 67, 68, that same year, we did a twin tour of Australia and New Zealand. That's all. And then we went to England, in West Indies and England in 77, in 71. So tours abroad were far and few between, and teams would come here. England would send MCC with the second 11, not their some of their main players not coming, and so on and so forth. Australia coming here on the way back from Africa. The Test cricket was few and was once in a year in India and once in few years abroad. When it's abroad, you just rely upon the radio and then the newspaper. In India, radio plus if you are there in that city, you watch the game. So for many cricket lovers, it was the first class cricket in terms of Ranji and Duli. And I remember accompanying my father for some of those games where the ground was packed, 20, 25,000 watching North Zone versus South Zone or stuff like that. And first division cricket and Buchi Babu, Moinudullah and stuff like that, where people will throng the grounds to see cricketers play. So there's a lot of love for the game and the cricketers even in those days. And whatever few victories came, people would hug the memories like anything. So a child like me who grew up in the 60s can never forget, let us say, our 1965 victory against New Zealand in India, for example. Or, for example, Raghu, a few years elder to me, can never forget India's 1959 victory over Australia at Kanpur and so on. In our book, From Mumbai to Durban, we call the years from 1947 to 1969 as the years of hope. Hope takes root. And one second.
The next one is a heady feeling, sir.
Thank you very much. You're better than me at our own book.
No, I thought it was a pre-tribute to Travis Head, sir, since you both love to seem to love him so much.
Lovely. Another Varaparam who's good. Okay. So a heady feeling. So for me and many others, I was 15 when India went to West Indies with Vadekar. Of course, Pataudi did all the important legwork in the 60s. But I think we should not forget Vadekar's contribution. Solid, sensible captaincy, ruthlessly pragmatic, and the ability to bring out the best from everybody. So, for example, we know how the triumvirate of Prasanna, Bedi, and Chandrasekhar worship Pataudi. Venkat was the odd man out because Pataudi genuinely believed, and like many others, that Venkat was the fourth in the quad. No questions. But when Vadekar took his team abroad, he was very clear that he needed Venkat to bowl one end while Chandra was trying to price it open at the other end. Or if Chandra was not there, then Bedi and Prasanna at one end, but I want Venkat bottling up the other. You will find that Vadekar got the best out of Durrani in that series. He got the best out of some of his contemporaries, like Sardesai played his best ever series. Gavaskar made his debut then. It's true that Pataudi did a lot of stuff for us. I think Vadekar at the right time was the right man in the right place, leading India to do. So for us, our first real sense of we can compete and we are as good as the best anywhere came out of that victory in West Indies and the victory in Oval a few months later. But those two are not in isolation, Varun. You must look at it as the entire set of 8 test matches. We played brilliantly in West Indies. The first test, Sardesai's double 100, took us from a precarious position to a position where we enforced a follow-on. And I think in the final test, we gave West Indies a scare of their life and could have won 2-0 in fact. Similarly, in England, we were lucky to draw the second test, I admit. But the first test, needing 183 to win, we went chasing it, knowing that rain is coming. We ended up at 138 for 8 or something like that, but only because we went chasing the rain. And Engineer, by the way, was promoted at that time, and Engineer did score some quick fire 30-40 or whatever I remember. So growing up, I think for us, you're right, 83 is a watershed in terms of one-day cricket, and then the time with India's opening up a few years later and the liberalization and globalization. But the 60s was the time of food shortage, drought. 70s was the time when inflation hit us. There was the agitation, there was the emergency. There was a lot happening in the country too. But if you look at cricket as an island, then the 70-71 series, I think, is a two of the most important test matches. Just to close that piece, for you, I don't think you had to wait in the 2000s for your happiness moments, Varun. From 2001 Calcutta, you started having a brilliant time in cricket. We were very, very fortunate that just after all that sleazy match fixing scandal, when Raghu and I were also turned off and cheesed off from cricket, suddenly you find Ganguly take up the team, supported by Kumble, Srinath, Dravid, Tendulkar, form such a fantastic, upright ambassadorial phalanx for them to take India forward. So I think if you ask your generation, I think you must have been also 14, 15 in 2001. For me, I was 15 in 70, 71, and for me, that was a seminal moment. For you, of your generation, I think 2001 was a seminal moment.
I'd like to add one point which made our cricket rise from mediocre to good and then very often great. That was the fielding. You see, from 1932 till the 60s, our fielding was, it had to be seen to be believed. It was that bad. All our cricketers were portly and would slowly run after the ball, whether it was Mankad or Roy or Ramchand or Hazare or Vijay Merchant, the one exception being Polyubriger. The 60s, from the time Pataudi came, the big difference was what he brought to the field. Giri was talking about 71. Right from 69 or so, our fielding, our closing catching made all the difference for our spinners. Both at, slip, gully and short leg. Ajit Wadekar at slip, Venkat Raghavan at gully, and Eknath Solkar and Abhidali at short leg, forward short leg and backward short leg, with either engineer or one of the other keepers. They made a closing ring, which was seriously, absolutely magnificent. They took catches. I've seen them taking catches, which even today will make you, gasp with admiration. It was, I think that was a very, very strong thing which happened in the early 70s. And after that, though we had a period of a plateau in the 80s and early 90s, again, I think the fit and fielding and the drill, the process of keeping fit so that you can move fast, all those things have made us the kind of professionals that we are in this game.
What brought about the change in fielding? Was it just individuals, or was there a concerted shift in culture or something?
We caught catches which came straight to our drift, nothing beyond that. And we were very, very slow movers. And so the outfielding was also pretty ordinary. And a few people from the services had a team. And, M.O. Adhikari, C.V. Gadkari, Gorpade, those people were from the services were the exceptions. But I think after Pataudi came, you must remember that he was playing for Sussex with Dexter and others in the 60s. And when he brought that kind of spirit in, and you must remember also that county cricket had some amazing close catches. Surrey won the championship for 7 years in succession, and their short leg and slip fielding was out of the world. And they won with Laker and Locke and all that because of the fielding support they had. So Pataudi knew about it, and he came in here, and I think he was largely instrumental in making fielding something important and calling for that kind of fitness and agility. I don't know if the coaches were all that, instrumental in doing that, but it started with Pataudi and somehow picked it up and didn't.
The closing was absolutely prehensile. Venkat told us that these 4 closing fielders would do a lot of drills, catching practice. And it would be a competition and matter of pride not to let the ball go past them when they were doing their closing catching. I don't know if our outfielders were doing that. So I think if let us say from a scale of 2, closing fielding went to 9, I think outfielding from 2 must have gone to 3.5. There was no sliding. They would still escort the ball to the boundary. There would be the odd Surti who would do stuff, Later on in the 80s, you had a bunch of guys, Azharuddin, Srikanth, Kapil Dev, and a whole lot of people who were good outfielders. But the point I want to make here, Varapuram Usi's time, is that I think it's a perfect time for me to make a small pitch for Mid Wicket Tales. Because you can already make out that Raghu and I love fielding. While the chapters are compiled and presented in a random manner, the first chapter is deliberately on close and fielding. So if you notice, both in the original version of Mid Wicket Tales as well as the new edition of Mid Wicket Tales, Pride of Place chapter number 1 is for close and fielding. On a personal note, if you ask me which is the last wicket you remember you took, which is sometime, I still pride myself on a cotton ball which I took when a batsman played early to me and gave me a catch for which I had to dive forward, take it and roll over. So that's the pleasure you get out of catching. It's indescribable. When you take a catch, the thrill that you get out of taking a good catch cannot be described. There is something, it is exaltation far supreme.
Yeah, it's amazing. So I'm guessing the fielding medals didn't start in 2023. They were instituted in 1971 itself. One question that I had is, obviously you've followed cricket, for a very long time. Was there any other point in time when India could be described as primarily a fast bowling unit, or is that a recent phenomenon? Was there ever a time where you could sort of rely on your pacers?
Not a fast bowling unit, but a very, very clever medium pace bowling unit was in 83 when it was Binny, Mohinder Raghunath, and who else? Madan Lal, who made us win those matches. And in the final, it was Gavaskar slip catching of these three medium pacers. Mohinder can't even be termed medium pacer. He was slightly faster than slow. So anyway, it was very, very skillful. And in England, when the ball is steaming and moving, it was so effective. And we did it quite brilliantly. Kapil was the only guy who was above 130 kilometers per hour. They're 120 kilometers or less.
Sir, I just wanted to pick up on that, the last bit that you mentioned, especially since you mentioned, Ganguly as one of India's best captains. A lot of our recent success in places where we have almost never had success or consistent success is down to our fast bowling. And as someone who's seen the struggle
and Ganguly's own bowling, no? Are you not giving him credit for his bowling?
I know Ganguly's own bowling too, but the question to ask here is how do you rate Kohli in, let's say, the pantheon of Indian captains? As there are very significant contribution going beyond just wins and losses that Ganguly has made and Pataudi has made. To a lot of us, the whole fast bowling piece has really come through and come together, only under Kohli. Would that be something that is your assessment too, or you tend to believe that we've always had pacers? Yeah, something came through it under Kohli's time.
The fact is that you started with Kohli and stuff like that, and Raghu ducked that question because among the two of us, I'm the guy who is more kind to Kohli and perhaps more objective. Kohli needs to be given a lot of credit for the way he's led India. In 2014, when he took over the captaincy from Dhoni, India was in a trough at that time. Post 2010 peak, they were going down. Lakshman, Dravid, Tendulkar all going, Sehwag going, and with literally a new batting unit and forging a new bowling unit. Within 2 years of taking over captaincy to lead India to number 1 on ICC Test ranking, I think is important. The fanatic fitness regimen that is now installed is also largely because of the role modeling that he does. Today we talk of Rohit walking the talk and saying fearless cricket and batting, and we give a lot of credit to Rohit for leading the way. In the same way, I think if you look at fitness levels of the Indian team over the last 6 years and the fielding standards, a lot of credit has to be given to Kohli. About Mid Wicket Tales, the new version, we had only a small paragraph on Kohli's captaincy, but I think it captures what I'm trying to say. And if you'll allow me, sometimes numbers help make this argument. Kohli has won more tests outside his country than any other captain has for other teams. So if you look at Joe Root or Smith or Ponting and others, they have not won as many test matches as Kohli has won outside. His win percentages and so on and so. Finally, it's a question of belief. I think that combination of Shastri and Kohli seriously believe that in England you need 4 fast bowlers. There's a slight difference. In Australia, when we went, we didn't say 4 fast bowlers. We had Ashwin and Jadeja. Ashwin then developed a problem, injury, and dropped out. In the second time when we went, Jadeja had a problem and didn't play the first test match. Otherwise, I think in Australia, they were open to playing 3 fast bowlers and 2 spinners. It was in England, after the WTC 2021, that suddenly they said there's no place for 2 spinners. That is what is called heartbreak. No, that WTC heartbreak created that kind of business. But sometimes the proof of the pudding is also in eating. In 2021, when India played 4 fast bowlers, including the all-rounder non-parallel called Shardul Thakur, he batted when he expected him to bowl and he bowled when he expected him to bat. So fantastic. So he gave you a couple of 50s. So that non-parallel all-rounder coming at 8 as their 4th fast bowler. In 2021, in those 4 tests, it worked. So how much Raghu may foam in the mouth saying we needed Ashwin as a spinner, in those 4 test matches, Ravi Shastri and Kohli's 4 fast bowler mantra worked. But you cannot take it to the next. So, for example, in 2022, when we went and played WTC, there was no earthly reason not to play Ashwin as your second spinner. And then in the test that Bumrah led and lost to England, where they chased 368, it was a phenomenal chase by England. But notwithstanding that, where is the case for Umesh and Shardul to play ahead of Ashwin? So, balance is all important. And to an extent, we were disappointed. We thought that Dravid might bring a certain difference.
I think you've muted yourself.
But we realized that it was the same with them.
No, but it's very poetic. You muted yourself when you were talking about Dravid.
I think that it was a mistake in 2023 WTC as well as the 5th test of 2022 to play 4 fast bowlers instead of Ashwin as your bowler. But in 2021, after the WTC final against New Zealand, even though Ashwin had bowled very well there, the hard call to take 4 fast bowlers worked for them. How much you may argue. See, when you bowl 90 overs, more and more teams now play 5 bowlers. Forget 4 fast bowlers. They play 5 bowlers. Whether you play 3 fast bowlers and 2 spinners or 4 fast bowlers and 1 spinner, any team that looks to get 20 wickets in a game says I can get 20 wickets when I play 5 fast bowlers. I have a much better chance if I play 5 bowlers.
This is a very strong point I hold on cricket. It's not about Ashwin or X or Y or Z. It's about how you select a team. Somebody bowling at 120 kilometers per hour. 120 kilometers per hour, a Madanlal kind of speed, is 120 kilometers per hour, 2 kilometers per minute, 2000 meters per minute. That is equal to 33 meters per second. From the bowler's release point to the batsman at the popping crease, the cricket pitch is around 20 meters. Approximate, again, rounded off. So, for the ball to reach the batsman when a bowler is bowling like Madan Lal's pace, it takes about 0.6 seconds. But the batsman doesn't have 0.6 seconds to react. He has to react based on earlier practice at the nets and his intuitive and trigger movement. He has to react in the first 0.1 to 0.15 seconds to play, leave the ball, play forward or backward, attack or defend, play in the V with the top hand or play square of the wicket with the bottom hand. No batsman has the time to process these steps sequentially. So the whole thing is a trigger movement based on your practice at the nets. So the point I'm driving is batsmen don't have much adaptability. They play the way they play based on the practice they've put in and the kind of batsman they are. A Vishwanath will play the way he did. A Sehwag will play the way he did. Kohli will play the way he does. And Kohli, if you remember, therefore found it very difficult when he had to switch from limited overs cricket to test cricket and was seen following the ball and edging catches of Anderson, because it's not very easy for a batsman. So my point here is batsmen cannot adjust so easily. But when we select a team, whether it is Australia or India, Brisbane or Old Trafford, we pick our 5 best batsmen. We don't have any quarrel. We don't say, hey, let's not pick this guy because this is a bouncy wicket. Let's not pick that guy because the ball is seaming. No, we pick our 5 best batsmen. But when it comes to bowling, you should pick your 3 best bowlers. This is where I have a problem with this 4 pacers and all this kind of shit. Okay, your 3 best bowlers for the last 3 years have been Umrah, Shami, and Ashwin. Period. So pick 3. Do you imagine Australia would have dropped Lyon because that pitch wasn't suitable, or they had more left-handers, or whatever it is? Do you think Vaughan was ever dropped by Australia because of a pitch or conditions of the wicket? You jolly well pick your 3 best bowlers and then fool around with the rest based on batting strength or whatever it is. So this is something I have a major quarrel with, and I don't know how you all feel about it.
When I was reading your book, and there's a lovely little passage where you talk about how all of India's great spinners, they played until they were dropped. There was no grand finale. There was no negotiated retirement. There was no fairy tale. There was no staged final match or anything like that. You write about it so beautifully, although you don't dwell on it too much. What you're implying is that there is almost a beauty to that brutality. You know, that there is a certain poetry to the fact that you play as long as you're useful, and then when you are no longer useful, you're cut. You know, you're chopped from the team.
We call them samurai.
Exactly. There is a beauty to that, and it got me thinking. You know, is it that culture has changed over time to the point where you are negotiating retirements with your big stars, or is that more of a batsman bowler thing in the sense that you continue to treat bowlers cruelly, but you allow batsmen to have their grand finale?
The chapter you refer to is called Fab Four Then and Now.
Yeah.
And we talked of how the spinning quartet after the Pakistan series faded in their own way one by one. And we talked at that time, comparing them at that time with the Fab Four batsmen, and there was non-stop noise in the media. He should retire, he should not retire, he should retire, he's past his use by date, and so on and so forth about the 4 players. And we said, why can't we give those 4 great batsmen space so that they go in their own way? Some of them know when to go and when not to go, etc. So that piece was actually in empathy with the 4 batsmen and saying they were playing in times when TRP and strident media had already begun to hurt people. Whereas the 4 spinners played in an era where they could just walk away into the sunset. So that was the background and context to that chapter. It is one of our first essays we wrote as a blog itself, and then became part of the book. If you look at later on, I think quite a few cricketers have gone without much fanfare. But the stars, you look at 3 of them, and I'll give you a contrast. Kapil Dev painfully lingered on because 432 was beckoning. If 432 was not beckoning, perhaps even Kapil Dev would have just faded off. If you look at Kapil's statistics before 90 and post 90, and you will find that actually Kapil was a much better all-rounder on paper, on stat, pre-1990 as compared to post-1990. But he dragged on, and we all knew he's dragging on. And as Indians, we wanted the world record also. So we didn't want to grudge that, etc. So that was one. The second was, of course, equally painful, where Tendulkar was hunting his 100th 100. A man who had served India for 24 years, done so much. Once again, it's painful. And the way he brought up that 100 was also painful. We lost the game and all that. But I think it was just an aberration. And therefore, Tendulkar being Tendulkar, it was okay. But look at the others, Sehwag or Lakshman or Dravid. They all went in their own way in their late 30s. Earlier cricketers used to retire in their mid-30s. Nowadays, with fitness levels being much better, people play on till 37, 38. Dhoni set a great example. Dhoni quit captaincy suddenly out of nowhere. Dhoni quit Test cricket out of nowhere. Dhoni quit one-day cricket in 2019 when he was already 39. But he had already given up captaincy and so on. And to some extent, for many of the younger generation, the way Dhoni treats the game can have a lasting impact. I think Dhoni very clearly treats success and failure as imposters. He also looks at this kind of celebrity and social media presence, etc., with some disdain. And in fact, was very happy in a village in Uttarakhand when the finals of World Cup were being played without bothering whether he was invited, not invited, etc. He's been there, done that. So I think you can look at Dhoni and say, oh, we are a country which produces this kind of farewells also. Look at Rahane and Cheteshwar Pujara. Nobody is saying no, they must play, they must be given a farewell, etc., etc. They are 35, 36 or whatever. If you find a good enough number 3 and number 5, I think they'll make way, and they're already making way. What will happen to a Kohli is different. I think even with Rohit Sharma, when he makes a decision, it will be smooth. The adulation mania for Kohli is what can be compared with the adulation mania for Tendulkar, Dhoni, and before that in much lesser proportions to Kapil Dev. And we are different as a country and culture compared to Australia, certainly, and England and others, where individual celebrations are kept at a certain level. We idolize our cinema stars and we idolize our cricketers to the point of craziness and stupidity. You can't change that, but I wish it could change.
Specifically on your point, I think world over, it has been true that batsmen have generally got more of the acclaim and the celebrity status than bowlers. There have been so few bowlers who've been captains of test teams all over the world. Batting somehow captures the imagination much more than bowling does. And that's why I talked about choosing your best 5 batsmen. But when it comes to bowlers, it's so much of, argument and tamasha.
Making a slight segue, I think one thing that I have been really blown away during this course of this podcast are your memories. I can't recall what 11 India played 2 test matches back, and you are able to effortlessly recollect fast bowlers who played in a test match in England, in the WTC, etc. That's kudos to you. And because we all complain and we are all consider ourselves fairly passionate and close cricket followers, we struggle with the surfeit of cricket. I mean, it just becomes too much for us, and we have to take our breaks, etc., and all that. I am imagining
You're watching
it
the
must
IPL
be...
retention announcement today or not? First
No
clarify.
chance. No chance.
No, Varun is the only one.
No,
But go on, please.
Sorry.
Continue.
I just want to say we don't watch the IPL very much, and once in a while, an hour or so every second match.
And I am imagining it especially as chroniclers of the game, it must be doubly difficult for you because, I mean, there is a responsibility on you to follow what's happening, what's going on, etc. Like how have you managed to deal with this commercialization of cricket? Like how have we managed to cope with it? Because I mean, even among our peer group, we have people dropping off every now and then saying okay, now it's become too much for us to follow, etc. I mean, do you attribute that just to your passion for cricket, or has there been a hook in terms of specific cricketers that you have managed to keep you connected with the game across the last few years specifically?
I was born in 1946, pre-independence India. I got into cricket at the age of 6, 1952. My mother was the one who introduced me to the game. She was a fanatic of the game. Her father had started a league club in Bangalore, etc., etc., and she knew everything about the game. And she hooked me on to cricket. In my young days, let's say from 1955 to 70, there was no TV. There were no major distractions. So if you were bored, you went outside and played, or you read books. You read books, the printed word, nothing in your hand, no gadget. So cricket, for many of us, especially for me, was the one major attraction, and it consumed my life. And I read everything that was written on cricket, from Australia and England especially, largely from England. And I followed county cricket like crazy. In the 60s, I would be naming 15 players from all the 16 counties, from Hampshire, Somerset, Glamorgan, Gloucestershire. So that was the kind of interest this game, I mean, there was a grip that this game had on my life, and it's no great shakes for me to remember even who played in the 60s, who won the county championship in 60. And therefore, it hasn't been a kind of a effort at all. It was very, very natural. But I must say, after 1980, and after Kapil Dev, and starting from maybe the late 80s or 90s, for about 15 years, I lost interest. I was hardly following cricket. It was only when Giri and I started writing again that I got immersed in cricket again.
I'm exactly 10 years younger to Raghu, 56 born, but not very different. So whatever Raghu said till 1970 is valid for me because I would be 15 then, and even later. Because even when television came, it took a few years and you would see highlights only, Raghu. So it was the printed word, it was the radio. Saturday Sports Special on BBC was where you caught up Paddy Feeney giving us all the scores and putting us on to commentary in various games and so on. And I've already talked about the tremendous hold that first class cricket had on us. You must also remember that we had very good sports writers in India also. So not only were we reading stuff that was coming in from England and Australia, but we were also reading stuff written in India about Indian games. So you had very, very good writers writing very knowledgeably and beautifully about the game. For me, the 90s, when Azharuddin took over captaincy, was when I lost it, precisely. It was also the time when you were Tigers at home and absolutely no hopers abroad. It was sad that you had Kumble and Tendulkar playing together for a side that had very little chance to win abroad. It's a pity. But if you ask me, in all these years of following cricket, my interest for cricket revived in Calcutta 2001 for sure. And it was at its lowest from 1990 to 2000. So I did miss, honestly, a little bit of Tendulkar at his best.
Obviously, you've mentioned how a lot of the media that you've consumed came in from the West, right? Also Indian sports writers. And I feel like there are two different conceptions of what makes a good pitch. I think Ashwin with his YouTube videos has told us how puff of dust is not an indicator of whether a pitch is good or bad, etc. At the same time, the recent World Cup final, you feel a little let down because on any decent pitch, India would have won. So, did you have a conception of a good pitch versus what India is doing now, where tests are ending in 2 days? Is there a Western sort of bias to it, or is there something legit that probably we are meddling too much into the conditions of the game?
A very quick aside concerning the pitch. Before we come to what's a good pitch or not, I'll tell you what is not a good pitch. Way back during the Packer time, when most of the top cricketers of Australia, England, and West Indies were playing in Australia the pajama cricket, one cricket team led by Kalicharan, which had just 2 or 3 of their regular 11 cricketers, toured India. I think the year was 1978 or 79. Maybe Giri will tell me. They came to Chennai to play a match. I can never forget that match. Kalicharan, Gomes, and were the 2 batsmen, and Van Burn Boulder. What is that? Patterson? Not Patterson.
No.
Sylvester Clark. Sylvester Clark, Norbert Phillip, and Van Burn Boulder were the fast bowlers. And this was in 87 or 88. And Madras, Chepauk. The pitch was like a concrete pitch. It bounced so much that Kapil Dev took 7 wickets and 4 wickets or something like that. We won that match. And it was an amazing pitch, which had so bounce on it that batting on that pitch was so difficult. But what I wanted to mention was, it also makes you understand how some people are not just good, but truly great. In that test match, Dilip Vengsarkar bagged a pair. He scored a duck in each innings. Sunil Gavaskar scored 1 and 3. And the man who won the match for us was one little fellow called G.R. Vishwanath. Vishwanath scored a century in the first innings and scored 49 in the second inning. And Vishwanath was playing on a pitch which seemed completely different from what everybody was playing cricket in. It was truly, truly amazing. So sometimes when pitches are very difficult, it brings out a certain skill and an art in batsmanship, which you cannot see on an ordinary pitch. So I wouldn't be too cruel about, different kind of pitches. I think it makes for a lot of very interesting things about the game.
Beautiful, Raghu. You brought that love for Vishnath and his ability to play on difficult wickets very well. It's sometimes forgotten in numbers and stuff like that many of Vishwanath's best innings have been in winning or saving causes, never in wasted causes, and often on difficult pitches. Talking of pitches per se, the question that Tonia, I think once again, if everybody strives for middle ground, we'll get some light. The problem is that you get heat when you get stuck on either ends of it. So I think people who say that it's all biased to say that we produce powdery wickets that turn from the first ball, or the others who say, look at you produce green tops, etc. Both have their points. I think an ideal pitch should last for 4 days on an average. At least take the game into a game where, let's say, the fourth innings is a 250, 200 run chase that finishes fourth evening or fifth morning. If you look at the statistics across the world, I think 90% of games are being decided these days, wherever they are being played. So you have a decisive test match 90% of the time in the last 10 years or so. I'm not having my book in front of me, but we have made some statistical notings there in the book, pointing out how matches are decisive. To an extent, it is because of the fact that teams are playing positive, aggressive cricket. So you have 3.5 runs and over, and very often 300 runs on the first day, and so on and so forth. But the important point is, if test matches are finishing abroad in 3.7 days on an average, in India they finish in 3.1 days. It is not that they are finishing in 4.5 days abroad and are finishing in 2 days here. Sorry. When you come to India or to the subcontinent, be prepared to play top-class spin bowling on wickets that help spinners. When you go abroad, be prepared to face good fast bowling on seaming wickets in swinging conditions. So I think that's how it is. Sometimes it's also the weather. I remember when I first started playing in Delhi, we would start our practices in September, when it's just going to start winter, and finish in March when the summer is going to set in. And during those 6 months of playing every Saturday and Sunday, I could make out the visible difference on the kind of pitches I was bowling on or batting on between September and March. By the time February came, I was licking my lips to bowl. And in September and early October, I would only be able to skid the ball off the pitch. So it is also part of weather and so on and so forth, the kind of soil, etc. So there are certain things that you cannot change. In India, you will have tracks that will spin hopefully from day one. In England, whether you like it or not, you will find batting challenging on the first day.
I played 5 years of my cricket in Bombay. And in Bombay, the Premier League matches happen during monsoon. It is between those 4 months that you play all your league cricket. And luckily, those 5 years, I was playing first division cricket. I've got to talk about one match which we played against CCI. The pitch was so terrible that this was the team. Ramesh Nagdev and KS Indrajit Singhji, the Indian wicketkeeper, were the openers. 1 down for CCI was Mahesh Sampath, a left-hander Ranji Trophy cricketer. 2 down was Hanuman Singh. 3 down was Pauline Umrigar. 4 down was MT Chandruban. 5 and 6 down were Karsan Gavri and Milind Rige. Like, they had batsmen till 8, and then there was Raj Singh Dungarpur and Sushil Sanghvi, the bowlers. They batted first on a wicket in which Indian Gymkhana Matunga, we didn't have even one Ranji Trophy player. We got them all out for 37. We got them all out for 37 because every ball stopped and then jumped up. I was standing at silly mid-off to Polly Umrigar without being scared. You can imagine. Unless it was a full toss, I had no, course to feel afraid. They were all out 37 and we won the match. So, does play on really, really tough wickets. And Bombay batsmen, because of this Kanga League, which is played during monsoon, have been adept more than most of the batsmen in the country to play on pretty bad wickets. Vishwanath, of course, was the exception.
Raghu, before we get into the rapid fire, we have to have you talk about your favorite Neil Harvey. I don't think any podcast featuring you can be complete without that. I just remembered and I thought I'll put that in quickly. And I want you to also talk about the nature of fandom. These days you have, as I think you alluded to, so much coverage, and every single shot and every single ball is analyzed to its depth.
Ad nauseam.
Yeah. And in the past, with all the reading that you did and all the radio stuff that you heard, there was perhaps a bit of legend to these famous world beating cricketers. And in the middle of that, you perhaps, unlike many other people of your generation, had an Australian as your favorite cricketer. How did that come about? And how do you look back on those times now, having watched so much cricket and having read so much pieces and so many pieces and having written so much yourself?
We were members of a club called Sportsman's Book Club. One sporting book came every month. My uncle in Bangalore, Gokul, member, and he made me a member from Chennai. And alternately, the books would be on cricket and football, about Tom Finney and all those great footballers of the 50s and 60s. So I started reading. And between the years 1949 and 1955, Neil Harvey was simply outstanding. He scored about 12 or 14 of his centuries in just 5 or 6 series there. He scored 8 centuries in 2 series against South Africa in 49 and 51. An amazingly attractive batsman. And I remember in 1956, when they came back after being lacquered in the Madras Test, he scored just 37 runs. And I was watching that match. And I can still remember almost every shot he played. What is it? 1956 to 2023. It is 44. I mean, I don't know, 69, some 60 years ago. And his footwork so amazing. And I'm so very sorry that both his centuries in 56 and 60, he scored in Bombay. And in Chennai, he scored 37 and 11. So Harvey was a favorite because he could never be dull. And the way he played Subhash Gupte, people still say Harvey is the only batsman who had the measure of Gupte. Remember, when Gupte went over to West Indies in 1952, the 3 Ws were in top form, Weeks, Worrell and Walcott. And by 1960 or by middle 50s itself, even at the height of Laker and everybody else, they were saying the greatest leg spinner we've ever faced is Subhash Gupte. So that day, Harvey was taking 3 steps down the wicket and driving him through covers. And it was, I don't know what it was. To me, there's never been anybody like Harvey. We've had Lara, we've had David Gower, we've had so many left-handers after that. We've had our own Ganguly. But still, sometimes it happens that you make somebody into something else. It's not a human anymore. It is something beyond what other humans can achieve. So perhaps it was also the age. Between the age of 10 and 25, I fell in love with cricket and with Neil Harvey. I think that's the reason why it has remained such a unbelievable association. And he's the only guy who's still living from the 1948 team. Harvey's 93 or something like that today.
Don't forget that Raghu himself was a sublime left-hander. If he had not moved to Bombay from Chennai, he would have played for Tamil Nadu for sure. I batted with Raghu when Raghu had finished with first division cricket, because I came to Chennai when Raghu was 37 or 38. I was 27, he was 37. And I had the fortune of batting one down because Raghu used to open for our team. And I've had the fortune of partnering Raghu in a 3 or 4 or 5 partnerships. And even at that age, and when he'd done with first division, Raghu's timing was almost God-given, effortless. And he'll come and tell me at the other end and say, this man is bringing it in, that man is bringing it out. All that and effortless. Only thing is, after a quick fire 30 or 40, Raghu would signal to the pavilion and say glucose, 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 because Raghu was already pooped by then. And I remember in all those
the Madras weather.
I know. And Raghu, yes, and Raghu would then leave. But by then he would have hit brilliant 30, 40, 50 and all that. And I would plod on and play for some more time, partly because I was younger and able to take the weather better. But I cannot remember, nobody will remember anything I did. And Raghu's every shot in those partnerships, I can remember because I had the best seat in the house.
One question I have to ask, since we're talking about Chennai and since we're talking about timing and all that, I have heard so many stories about T. Srinivas, so many. Many of our listeners may not have heard of him, unfortunately. So can you please tell us something about this Tamil Nadu legend?
The first time I saw T. Srinivasan was January 1972, Mysore versus Madras, Ranji Trophy match. T came 5 down or 6 down, and I was in that 3 rupee seat at Central College ground stands as a 15-year-old boy. I knew enough cricket by then to say that this man was a stylist par excellence. Later, had the fortune to see him play a couple of glorious first-class hundreds. And to me, it is still the greatest regret that T didn't play 20 tests for India, batting at number 3, 4 or 5 of that.
T played a lot of his early cricket on a concrete wicket in Nungambakam. Therefore, he batted against balls which were bouncing chest high from just short of a length or of a good length. So his back play was amazingly good. And he played with a straight bat, not necessarily cutting or pulling, but off the back foot through covers and extra cover. And that was sublime. And I played with him a few times, both for the same side and as opponents. And the knock I can never forget is the innings that took him to Australia. This was a match, it was a zonal match. It was South Zone versus West Zone. Vadekar was in the other side. And T at Chepauk scored 129 or something. He had some 4 sixes and 24s or so against a top-class West Zone attack. He was a marvelous cricketer, but extremely talkative and very, very, for people who didn't know him, they think this guy talks a little too much. And it was perhaps that possibly went against him because he wasn't a favorite of Gavaskar. Remember, he played just 1 test. He scored 22 and 28 in the 2 innings. And he played only that 1 test. He was an amazing batsman. Truly amazing.
He was not playing at a time when people like Gulam Parkar, Suru Nayak, and Kirti Azad and others were batting for him. This is worse than the Shardul Thakur story that Raghu began.
But we have talked about this in our book.
Comparison. I think Shardul Thakur 10, Gulam Parkar, Suru Nayak, Dheeraj Parsana, Kirti Azad all on one. And poor T was fabulous. If I may just mention that in our book Mid Wicket Tales, page 68, we have a small box essay called They Too Played for India. It's a tribute to all those wonderful cricketers who either were unfortunate to play just the odd test for India, or even more unfortunate not to have played for India. when they were as good as many of the others who played during their times for India. So
There was
T
a very-
features in that story on page 68. The best square driver with a vertical blade in the country in the last 60 years, T is Srinivasan, according to
Off the back foot with a straight bat. It was not cutting and pulling. It was driving off the back foot of a ball which was coming high and above shoulder, nearly shoulder high. He would rock back and hit it through extra cover. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
All right, so we'll do the quick fire now, Giri and Raghu. The first one is perhaps a bit of a long one, and I'm going to put you on the spot with that one. You guys have to give me a combined West Zone and South Zone 11 for a test at Madras against an all-time Australia team.
Oh gosh. Combined West Zone and South Zone team. 3 spinners. Kumar, Shivalkar and Venkatraghavan.
No, Subhash Gupte, definitely.
Oh, Subhash Gupte. Sorry. 4 spinners. He's already said your best 5 bowlers can play for the team, irrespective of whether they're spinners or fast bowlers.
Javakal Srinath and Samakant Desai.
Gavaskar,
So,
Venkasarkar, Vishwanath, Lakshman, Dravid, Tendulkar. Impossible. So this is a mug's game, this was Chopsy at its mischievous best. This was Vayapanam and many Usis. Because there's no way a sensible guy will make a team of less than 40 out of this. Fight till tomorrow morning.
the wicketkeeper is Syed Kirmani.
Farooq Engineer and so on.
And Farooq Engineer. If Kirmani is injured or if we lack an opener who is injured, Farooq Engineer will open.
Then my elder sister will say BK Kundaran.
Oh, lovely.
My elder sister's favorite cricketer, BK Kundaran.
Let me put the last needle in the banana. Who's going to be the captain?
Shardul Thakur, no?
Raghu, you were going for the real captain, I guess.
Sunil Gavaskar. I think Sunil Gavaskar, if you give him, the way he captained India in 1985 in that series in Australia, World Series, which we won. It was truly amazing captaincy where he didn't do much with the bat or anything. He came lower down.
Yeah.
But the way he used L. Sivaramakrishnan, the way he changed the batting order against New Zealand, it was first-class captaincy. He showed us that he can be a great captain if he didn't have too many, swords hanging on top of him.
Yeah, see, the problem with his he would become cussed in his captaincy. That was the problem. That's why he brought Suru Nayak and Gulam Parkar and others. It was almost as though he was being cussed. There are 2 times when I thought Gavaskar's captaincy was top-notch. If he had captained throughout his career the way he captained in that Benson and Hedges World Series, he would be among India's best captains ever, number 1. He also captained India very well against Pakistan in that 1979-80 series. I watched that game in Firozshah Kotla when he placed a leg slip specifically for Mudassar Nazar to get him caught off Kapil Dev. I mean, small nuggets, but just to say how well he captained India in that 79-80 series against Pakistan. Apart from the 1985 series, the Raghu that you said. I think he was absolutely brilliant in that Benson and Hedges tournament.
Lovely.
Now, Chopsy, no more of these mischievous questions to keep us busy till tomorrow morning. Mugs game questions not allowed.
Okay, you have only one spot for an all-time India team in some World Test Championship final, and you have to choose out of VVS Lakshman and GR Vishwanath.
Depends on the wicket.
Okay, let's do Lords.
If it's a very difficult wicket with a lot of bounce, GR Vishwanath. If it's Lords, Philip Venkasarkar.
Poor VVS.
You got stumped, Chopsy, by my old friend. Don't take him lightly.
Okay, the next one is perhaps again something that relies on your memory and your experience through the ages, and maybe in other podcasts you'd be asked about the most favorite ones. but I'm going to ask you about your least favorite commentators through the ages. And please don't diss only the current generation. You also have to diss the guys in the past.
The
The
worst
connect
ever
between the
commentator-
last question and this one is El Shiva, is it? El Shiva Ramakrishnan
No,
makes an appearance.
the worst. No, you guys have no idea of how bad our commentary could have been in the olden days. The guy who takes the cake is Maharaj Kumar Vijayanagaram,
Ah,
Busy.
lovely.
who was simply the worst commentator ever that one can hear. So he's got no comparison. I mean, nobody can come close to him. There was another guy who was pretty bad called Suresh Saraya. And there was a third one who I remember called Berry Sarbadikari. I don't know why
Yes.
people thought he was a good commentator, because he was really bad. He was really bad.
Okay. Hey,
Giri.
you have unanimity here between me and Raghu. All three were painful. Huh? My mother's favorite commentator, you must ask.
Okay, tell us who
Anand
is.
Rao.
Okay, I don't. Dosaji?
No, Anand Rao was a nice.
No. Dosa was only a statistician. Anand Rao was, oh God.
Because when I used to go to school and come back in the afternoon, Anand Rao was the guy who would patiently summarize the game and say everything slowly enough for her to understand and jot down on a paper for me. And she said, I love this guy because he tells me stuff in a manner that I can write. He gives me enough time to write and give it back. So, for example, if a batsman played a defensive shot to mid-off, Anand Rao would say, drives it to mid-off. Mid-off kneels down, makes sure of stopping the ball, gathers it, and the ball is already back in the hands of the bowler.
But would you believe it? When Anand Rao did this resume, sometimes he would end it with, while I have been telling you all this, 3 more wickets have fallen.
because as Anand Rao is talking to listeners from Far East and so on and so forth and summarizing, and the bat will come a sound like this, 25,000 crowds going here, and you know a wicket has fallen. Otherwise, crowd
Step
and
marks.
आवाज क्यों करता है यार?
Step
And
marks
when I
more
was
important.
Okay, and from the current generation now.
You mute it a
Current
lot.
generation, some of the people, let me say, the guy I liked the best ever was a chap called McGillivray, Australian.
Hey, he's not current.
Alan-
Raghu, he's not current. Raghu, he's asking.
I know.
asking-
No. I said the best commentator I've ever heard is Alan McGillivray.
Yeah.
I like Michael Atherton. I think he's excellent as a commentator on TV. Munir Hussain also I like.
Mm.
I am not particularly fond of the Australian commentators somehow. I don't know. After Alan McGillivray and Michael Charlton and others of those days, today's I'm not a great fan of all commentators having to be cricketers. Unfortunately, the only non-cricketer is Harsha Bhogle, which I find rather amusing. But to think some commentators who were non-great cricketers would have been very good.
Yeah. Among modern TV commentators, a quick word. I think I'm very happy that Tamil and Hindi and other commentaries are now available. And they took some time to find their own media. But I think the commentators are now enjoying themselves thoroughly. You don't have to force Indian cricketers to talk in a language that they are not comfortable with, and therefore, unfortunately and unfairly, suffer in comparison with Nazar Hussain or Michael Atherton or somebody like that, or Michael Owen. Here you have Indian commentators, for example, in Tamil, a Badrinath, a Hemang Badani, a Sadagopan Ramesh, or what Mukund, Abhinav Mukund, very knowledgeable, very perceptive, very sharp strategically, and having a ball, because they are yours is only Varaparam Usi. Theirs is full hammer and tongs fun throughout the 6 hours. So they are
RJ
having
Balaji,
a ball.
are you familiar with RJ Balaji?
Yeah. RJ Balaji is the non-cricketing Harsha Bhogle with only comedy. I mean, the comedy part of it. But I think the regional commentators have started to enjoy themselves. They're confident in their skin. And I think it says a lot for the culture and country and environment that we are in today, that our Indian commentators in their own language are calling the game beautifully and confidently without being conscious of the fact that they are not good in English, which I think is a very, very great level. Otherwise, poor Anand Rao and Chakrapani and others were suffering because they were being compared with English commentators whose first language was English. Not fair at all, not level playing ground at all. Now you have a level playing ground, and I don't mind listening to Tamil commentary in preference to English when the mood takes me.
Okay, the next one is, who do you think has been India's best fast bowling all-rounder since Kapil Dev? And how many false dawns have you seen?
Shardul Thakur.
After Kapil Dev.
Sir, I've got you there. I've got you there, Giri.
No. After Kapil Dev, because you said Kapil Dev, I can't think of anybody else. And nobody else has come even remotely close to. I consider Kapil Dev the greatest cricketer India has produced ever.
Irfan, I think, was
Irfan,
good for a while.
Irfan was good. Yes.
For the first time in probably 140 years of cricket history, we have three spinners occupying the top three positions as all-rounders. Shakib Al Hasan, Ashwin and Jadeja. Never before has it happened. You had a Beno at for some point of time somewhere, you had Wilfred Rhodes and Vinu Mankad, but you had a bunch of fast bowling batting all-rounders together at the same point of time, be it a Pollock or a Callis or a Chris Gaines or, of course, the famous four of Kapil, Imran, Botham and Hadley. But for the first time ever in current cricket, in the 2015 to 2025 era, you have three spinning all-rounders as the best all-rounders of the game. Something we must remember.
Yep.
I'm
Lovely.
sad Manoj Prabhakar doesn't find a mention anywhere in this conversation.
Oh yeah, Manoj Prabhakar.
Waiting
Yeah,
for the
sure.
record.
Yeah, sure. You remember his in-swinger was tricky, huh?
Yeah.
Good bowler, but a wicket guy, I think.
No, but a versatile guy. He would open the batting for you, bat at 7 and all that. I think it was value for money cricketer. Manoj Prabhakar.
And the go slow in Kanpur.
So,
And all
Chops, you're
that.
not considering Gavaskar an all-rounder, despite opening the bowling and all. This is,
Yeah, he's cut off his minimum 5 wickets or something.
You know, there was a match in England, I think it was a test match, when people were injured, and besides Farooq Engineer, I think BK Kundaran was also playing in the 11, and Kundaran opened the bowling. You check
Wow,
that.
okay.
He opened the bowling.
Interesting.
In those days, you are allowed to roll the ball on the ground back to the bowlers and all that. So that's why
This,
you
I
could
think,
bring the spinners on early.
Raghu, there was an incident when I think someone very, very senior had mentioned to you in a Bombay match that you shouldn't do that rolling bit.
Yes.
Vasu Paranjpe.
No. I was captaining the side. We were playing Indian Airlines. And, I had insisted on a guy being included in the 15 and said, if something happens to the wicketkeeper, don't worry, I'll keep. We don't need a second keeper. And as it happened in the first match, our wicketkeeper got injured. The ball flew off his bat and he cut his eye. So I had to keep wickets all the other matches. And when we played Indian Airlines, their captain was Vijay Manjrekar, father of Sanjay Manjrekar.
Sanjay Manjrekar, son of Vijay Manjrekar.
So Vijay Manjrekar scored 100 against us in that match. Yeah. And constantly, when he saw me rolling the ball back sometimes to the bowler, he said, son, you must never do that. You must never do that.
By then, he must have been like unable to run or anything, right? He must have been quite
Vijay
portly.
Manjrekar hardly ran even in his young days. Okay. He was a pretty bad fielder, but he was an amazingly good bat who had a, dodgy knee. When he was young, he used to hook and sweep and all that. Later on, he couldn't play any of those strokes. So later, he became a batsman who hit all his runs between third man and cover point. He would drop and cut, and he would hit the ball between even four fielders, somewhat like G.R. Vishwanath. In that region, he was a king.
Here's something that the late Raju Bharatan told me when we were talking to him while preparing our book from Mumbai to Durban. So I reached out to Raju Bharatan in connection with a particular delivery of Chandra's that he called the delivery of the century. I mean, a beautiful leg break to take Peter Burgess' wicket. And he was the only living journalist who had seen it. So it was in that connection I talked to him. One thing led to another. And do you know what Raju Bharatan had mentioned? He said that when Pataudy took his 1967-68 team to Australia, he was telling the selectors that even though Manjrekar has retired from Test cricket 2 years ago, and Contractor has not played for some time, do you know that Pataudy wanted Manjrekar or Contractor in his 1967-68
Wow.
team to Australia?
Wow.
Now, that is some story that Raju Bharatan told me.
Manjrekar retired in 64.
And Pataudy wanted him to come back in 67 and take him to Australia. He even wanted Contractor to come, Raghu. Can you imagine?
On that note, we would love to have like how many more hours with you to keep chatting to you about all of these little stories and wonderful anecdotes. But I must thank you so much for opening up to us. I hope this experience has been slightly different for both of you compared to the other podcasts that you've been on to promote the book and to talk about the book. I mean, we've absolutely loved listening to you narrate all of these stories, and I think the way in which you've spoken to us today and told us all of these stories, it's as if you are still straddling across generations, and may that continue for very, very long.
Absolutely. So long as you say
Thank you
so
so
long
much.
as you say bye Giri and Raghu and not Giri sir and Raghu sir.
For
But
sure.
quick thing, where can we catch? I mean, Mid Wicket Tales obviously is available for sale on Amazon, other bookstores, etc. And
Yes.
Well Caught, you can catch it on Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, right? Is there anything else that we should be aware of? Where can we catch some
No,
more?
at this point of time, like Arjuna and the fish, all our attention in this podcast is if Mid Wicket Tales, Century and More of Cricket, the book that we released recently, more people know about it, and if people can find it interesting enough to reach out, it's on Amazon, of course, and online, and in bookstores, hopefully. The podcast, of course, on Spotify is Well Caught. I think good.
Giri, Mid Wicket Tales is also the Kindle version is available, isn't it?
Yes,
you know
yes,
about
yes.
it?
Yeah,
Yes,
yes.
Kindle version.
So if you want a blurb and you're like basically heartbroken after the World Cup, like I am, take it from Rahul Dravid. This is a great compilation straight from the hearts of two cricket romantics. And more importantly, it makes you fall in love with cricket all over again. So best way to get over the heartbreak, guys, go get the book, Mid Wicket Tales.
Thank you so much, Giri. Thank you so much, Raghu. And we wish you all the best. We wish Mid Wicket Tales all the best. The new podcast, Well Caught, all the best. And of course, Mumbai to Durban is an amazing book too. My favorite among all the three that you've written, and may that also continue to do very, very well.
Thank you so
Absolute
much.
pleasure. We had a ball doing this. Bye bye.
Bye. Bye.
TV umpire to director, we have a player review. Can we rock and roll, please?